Welcome to the new audio podcast with Gelmi. Take off now and boost your efficiency in leadership, teamwork, and customer contact. Today's topic is the Valley of Tears.
Have you ever found it difficult to deal with somebody else's emotions? Especially when confronted with a difficult change, a change that is perceived as negative? Have you ever found it difficult to deal with your own emotions when you yourself are confronted with negative change and sudden change? Well, of course, this is challenging. This is difficult. And I would like to introduce you to a very simple yet effective model that may allow you to better understand what we are going through as human beings when confronted with sudden change that we consider negative for ourselves. And that's called the Valley of Tears. It's a process that we are going through, a process with several stages that we naturally are going through when confronted with change. Let me give you a very simple example to illustrate what this Valley of Tears looks like. Suppose for a moment that you had booked a vacation and now the day of departure has come. So you go to the airport, you park your car, you take your luggage and walk over to the departure hall where this big screen is positioned with all the flight numbers and the check-in counters and the gate numbers, etc. And you try to spot your flight and, oh, there it is, flight number, destination, and, canceled. It says canceled. Now, for a moment, think of your initial, immediate reaction to this information. Well, most likely, you would react like most people and think something like, oh no, this can't be true. So, the first stage of this Valley of Tears is called denial. Some sort of resistance or denial of what you experience. Once, and this may be very quickly in this particular situation, once you understand that the flight is actually really cancelled and it's not a mistake, you may get angry. You may build up some anger and really, really get annoyed about the fact that your flight is cancelled. And you may express this anger for a moment. And then once the main energy of this anger has evaporated, usually another type of emotion remains present, which is more nostalgia or sadness, some sort of insecurity or anxiety even, depending on the situation. What if I don't get another flight today? Oh no. What if my vacation goes down the drain? Oh my God. And only then, after that, you hit the bottom of the Valley of Tears. And what we find there is the next step, which is called rationalization. That's the moment when the main emotional reactions have gone, and you start thinking of options. Okay, now my flight is cancelled. What can I do? What are my options? I could go and have a beer first. Or I could walk over to the next airline counter and ask what I need to do and what my options are to catch another flight today. I could call the hotel, etc., etc., etc. So, laying out all the options in front of you in order for then moving into the next step of the curve, which is to make a decision. And with this step, we move into the upward-facing part of the Valley of Tears. Once we have hit rock bottom, we go back up the other side by making a decision. okay, I'm now going to first go and have a beer, and then after that, I'm going to go to the airline counter. Once you have made the decision, you can move into the next phase, which is acceptance and realignment. This is when you actually really finally accept the situation for what it is and realign your energy and your focus of attention to the new situation and the decision you have taken, until you can reach the final step and come back out of the valley of tears by committing to the new situation. Now, this is a very natural process we are going through whenever we are confronted with sudden and negative change. And of course, depending on the situation, depending on the weight of this change, this process can either last for a few moments only, or it can last days. If you lose a loved one, of course, this process takes much, much longer. It's important to understand that there is no shortcut. There is no shortcut from denial to commitment directly. But it's a very natural thing to first dive down into a certain emotionality and then come back out the other end. So, in other words, we could say the way out is through. It's not about getting over something, as we say in English. Yeah, you need to try to get over it. It's not about getting over it. It's about going through it. So you come back out the other end and you really go through all the steps of the process. For a few years, I have done outplacement consulting, which means that I have supported, consulted, and coached managers who were asked to leave the company and look for a new job. The first few sessions usually consisted in helping the person to go through these first stages of the Valley of Tears, to move their perspective from looking back in anger and sadness to forward into the future, looking at options and opportunities that come with the situation. So it's important to understand that going through the process and taking the time or granting the time to others to go through this process is crucial. So whenever, as a leader, for instance, you have to inform your team about a change that will not necessarily be a positive change for them, understand that they will have to go through this process. And there's another thing that is important to understand. The first downward-facing part of this process is mainly emotion. Now, if we look at how our brain works, we can say that we have like an emotional brain and a rational brain. And once the emotional brain takes over, and once the emotions boil up high, our executive brain or our rational brain is shut down. Or at least our ability to clearly think and make rational decisions is drastically impaired, depending on the level of emotion. That's why we often do things or say things in our state of emotion that we regret later on when our executive brain has rebooted and is back on. And we realize that maybe I shouldn't have said this or that and shouldn't have done this or that. That's the reason why. So whenever you have to confront somebody with change that they will perceive as negative, help them go through this first part of the curve, or actually through the whole curve, but particularly the first part. Knowing that It may not be very helpful to rationally explain things while the person is in the first 3 stages of the curve, because literally there's nobody there to listen. There's nobody there who can understand the rational arguments and explanations. Instead, help them to go through these first stages by simply being there, being present, by listening, by taking the person seriously, and by acknowledging their emotions and helping them to go into the next stages of the curve. So let's assume you have a customer who has a complaint. When do they usually call? Well, not when they are totally relaxed, right? Usually the customer calls at the peak of their anger. Now, knowing what they're currently going through, you will quickly understand that it doesn't make a lot of sense to rationally explain what happened and why it happened, but to just simply listen, let them vent, and acknowledge that they're currently very angry. So the quicker you do that, and the more effectively you do that, the more easier or the quicker the person can reach the bottom of the curve and start rationalizing. Now, the same is true, of course, also when dealing with your own reactions to negative change. When going through your own emotions, give yourself time to go through them. Don't try to put the lid on a boiling pot of water. Instead, give yourself time and try not to make any important or big decisions with a big impact during this first stage in which you are emotional and in which your ability to rationally judge the situation or assess the situation and make rational decisions is really dramatically impaired. So I hope this Valley of Tears model has helped you to better understand what is actually happening when somebody is confronted with sudden or negative change, including yourself. My wish for you is that this impulse will help you increase your personal effectiveness. Yours, Thomas Gelmi.